Welcome to the New England Football Show. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. And tonight we're joined by old friend Andy Backstrom, who's going to be at the Combine this week and is going to be doing some work for us in Indianapolis. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's been too long, that's for sure.
Good to see
It
you.
has been too long. Yeah, it's good to see you indeed. And it has been too long where, when Kevin had reached out to me last week and he said that you were going to be there and we're available to do some, produce some content for us. I was pretty excited about that because I know the quality of your work and I know how in tune you are with college football. And I know that you're going to definitely produce some good content for us this week. Before we get started talking about the Combine with Andy, I do want to remind you that if you're in the market to sell your current home, purchase your first home, or refinance, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience in the business, Herb is the person you need in your corner when you're ready to make your next real estate purchase or refinance. Again, give him a call at 781-254-2846, or you could shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, Andy, as we were talking before we went live, and of course, you're going to be heading over to Indianapolis tomorrow. The Combine officially kicks off tomorrow with Media Day. Mike Vrabel is scheduled to meet with the media at 10:15 in the morning tomorrow. Elliot Wolf will be meeting with the media on Wednesday at 1 p.m. I want to get your thoughts on this Combine from a Patriot perspective, Andy. Obviously, we know they have the fourth pick in the draft. They have about $130 million in cap space. But how important is this week for the Patriots, but in general, for any team? Why is the Combine important?
Yeah, I think with the Patriots, you've already got your quarterback in Drake May, so you're in a good position to look for the best available, which is a good spot to be in, especially with a quarterback class that's a bit thinner than usual. We can talk about that later, but it's hard to judge exactly, but it's a good spot to be in to know you have your guy, you got a new coach, and you can kind of search for a player that is going to upgrade the roster. The Patriots need talent pretty much everywhere. And so if you're looking for the best available, that's a good spot to be in this week. You're seeing a lot of guys in person for the first time. Pro days are going to come after this. So you're going to get either some in-person testing that you'll see here. And even for the guys that aren't testing, you're getting interviews with them. So it's important to get those done as far as knowing their personality, the way they would fit into your team culture, which is obviously important for someone like Mike Vrabel. So as they're trying to build this culture in this new area of Patriots football, I think it's a good spot to be in with the number 4 overall pick, because there's a lot of guys on this big board that you see all these analysts have that are great players, just not necessarily at that quarterback position.
Andy, I'd be remiss if I didn't start out by saying congratulations on your Super Bowl. You are a Philly guy, right?
Philly for the most part, but I'm actually randomly an Arizona Cardinals fan, as you'll see behind me. So I have missed out on 2 Super Bowls in the last 8 years for a decision I made when I was 6 years old.
I did not remember that. So,
yeah.
But either way, just kind of sticking with that theme that John had, to me, the interviews are equally as important as the on-field stuff, because you're getting to know, someone that might be the face of your franchise for the next 10, 15 years. Just some thoughts on the interview process and maybe what you'd like to see change, or what you like about just sort of how they do things down in Indy, even though I know you haven't been there yet.
Yeah, well, I've been to 2 combines previous, but I guess it's different for us into the media, right? Talking to these players, because they do those interviews, and those are great for people that are reporters and, that are all in there trying to get their stories written. But they do obviously the interviews behind the scenes with the front office and the coaches, and that looks completely different. And you'll see sometimes the inside access. Some of these programs will put out documentaries, and you get to see snapshots of what it's like with the coaches grilling these players. And some take more of an aggressive approach, and they really just put it on them and demand a lot from them in those meetings. Others take more of a casual, funny approach to it, and players will talk about like jokes that were made or certain things that happened in them that were more lighthearted. So I think it is tough for the players because they don't know exactly what to expect, like what kind of room they're entering in, unless it's a coach that's been around for a really long time. Like people know generally what to expect from someone like Mike Tomlin, or, when Bill Belichick was around, someone like Bill Belichick. So the coaches that have been there, they know. But the newer coaches, it's different. And some like Mike Vrabel, yeah, you would know what to expect maybe, but it's always, there's a chance it's different when they relocate and they get a second shot being a head coach.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up the interview process and how it's worked. The combine has changed so much in recent years. It used to be kind of a destination event for general managers and head coaches, but as we've seen in recent years, Andy, not everybody attends. Not every team's general manager is there. Not even every team's head coach or their entire staff is there. With the Patriots, however, they're going to be there. I've talked to a couple people that told me expect a full contingent there, both in terms of the front office, which we've already seen, and Andrew Callahan confirmed that earlier today, that Elliott Wolf, Matt Groh, Alonzo Highsmith are going to be there. Obviously, Vrabel's going to be there. But I was also told that you're going to see a decent amount of the staff there as well, as they really try to get a handle on all the talent that is in Indianapolis. And you brought up a good point earlier. When you look at the composition of this roster right now, and John Lyons and I talked about this yesterday on the Patriots post-combine preview, they really, truly, outside of quarterback, they can literally draft for every other position. I mean, they have multiple needs across the board. No position is off limits. What is a position in your estimation that outside of what we've been talking about, offensive line, wide receiver, what's another position in your estimation that's a position of need for the Patriots that you think they really need to address both in free agency and the draft?
Yeah, I think edge rusher is always a place you can upgrade. And when you look at like positional value, it's quarterback and then it's probably edge. And I think with this draft, there's a lot of guys that are capable. Abdul Carter's the number one guy that people think of. He'll definitely go somewhere in that top 5. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M is another guy that sticks out. Same team, but Nick Scourton. There's a lot of talent there. Ohio State's got 2 guys in Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. I think that position is always a place you can upgrade. You need someone that can get to the quarterback and finish at that position. I think for the Patriots, that's another need on the other side of the line of scrimmage that you're always looking to upgrade.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And when you look at this defensive line, defensive tackle, edge group, I mean, I've been doing this 26 years in terms of the draft. This is as good a group as I've seen. And you mentioned some of the names, and I do want to come back to some of those guys. But this is a group that I think is going to force a lot of general managers, even if they don't necessarily have an immediate need at edge or defensive tackle. This is the type of group that's talented enough that you're going to get some executives around the league that are going to say, even if we don't necessarily have an immediate need there, we might want to jump into the pool here and take one of these guys because you know what? That they have too much talent, too much potential down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the Patriots are at right now. It's get the best available, upgrade when you can. I mean, the way I see it, they still have probably another year before you're looking at a season where you get, okay, they're contending in the AFC. Look at the way the AFC is built right now. It's basically the Chiefs, you have the Ravens, you have maybe the Bengals, and then, you have the Buffalo Bills, and that's the hierarchy right there, those teams. And until you're in that conversation with them, you have to be looking at the best available. Of course, the quarterback part of it's an equation that you have to solve. But right now, I think it's Operation Patience with Drake May. And I think everyone wants to see what that looks like with another year and with a new staff.
And Ken Matthias joins the show. Thanks for checking in, Ken. Apparently, Ken thinks this is the Arizona Cardinal Combine show. Question for the panel, but especially Andy. I'm a big Kyler Murray fan, and I'm curious what you think Coach Gannon needs to do to surround him with more offensive talent, weapons in the slot or outside for wide receiver. Ken, thanks for checking in again. Arizona Cardinals question there, Andy Backstrom. What do you think?
Yeah, that's rare. I'm surprised.
So am I.
Yeah, I would say, honestly, I don't think they need to do a whole lot of upgrading. I mean, you would like to sign a wide receiver free agent. The free agent class is not great for wide receivers. And we can talk about that too with the Patriots because that's also at play there. But try to find a guy that you can salvage. Chris Godwin's probably the most attractive free agent wide receiver, I would say, besides T. Higgins. It's probably going back to Cincinnati, so I don't even include him in that. But Godwin might go back to Tampa Bay as well. But try to find one of those older wide receivers that you can upgrade for someone like Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch. And then I think that, honestly, we'll keep this short, but Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. just need to get on the same page. And that's a lot of the time with a rookie quarterback, or not a rookie quarterback, a rookie wide receiver and a quarterback. Like, you just need more time to develop that chemistry and that rapport. So, and you'll see that too in New England. Like, I feel like Drake May, you need a guy that is your guy, and you need to develop that over the offseason, because once you have a true wide receiver one and a guy, I mean, that a 50-50 ball becomes a 60-40 ball and a 70-30 ball. Once you have that, I feel like the offense looks different and the quarterback play looks different too.
100%. Speaking more in general terms, just about this draft overall, the consensus seems to be, it's not loaded in terms of top tier prospects, and but the depth is there. Do you agree with that overall? Just sort of assessment about this draft?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of depth, especially in the offensive line and the defensive line. And like, look at the team that just won the Super Bowl. The Philadelphia Eagles won on the line of scrimmage. They dominated Kansas City Chiefs in the trenches. And that's what you got to do to have a sustainable level of success in the NFL. That's why I think the Eagles could go back to back, depending on who they re-sign in free agency. And they've built through the draft. And that's a good time as any to build up that spot. You want young guys that show the versatility to play multiple positions, especially on the offensive line, where depth is always a concern. And on the defensive line, just as we talked about with the edge position or the traditional, defensive tackle positions, now is the time to stockpile those guys. And I think it's tough for fans sometimes, because that's not the most, flashy pick that you can make. It's not Travis Hunter. It's not a quarterback. But if you're looking at teams that are winning the Super Bowl, again, like the team we just saw, look how big the offensive linemen are for the Philadelphia Eagles. Look at the defensive linemen they had that they could just consistently rush forward, not have to blitz. That is a luxury in the NFL, and you need to find a way to build that. And I think the draft, especially like this one, is a good way to start. No,
you just took the words right out of my mouth. I think that if I'm a Patriot fan, this is the kind of draft class you want. This is the type of talent that you need to upgrade your roster. The strength of this draft is at running back. It's along the offensive line, as we mentioned earlier, defensive tackle, edge, cornerback. Those are the strong positions in this draft. It's not about necessarily the quarterback position or even wide receiver. This is still a pretty good wide receiver group. But if you're a Patriots fan, Andy, you've got to be pretty – if you're looking at this objectively, you've got to be pretty – excited with the possibility that Mike Vrabel, Elliott Wolf, and this front office could really retool this roster, and they can do what you said. They can do it organically, and they can do it up front, and that is the key here. This is how Mike Vrabel is going to want to play. He's going to build from the inside out, and he's going to start by focusing on the offensive line, protecting Drake May, but then, as you mentioned earlier, also rushing the passer. When it comes to the offensive line, obviously, we've heard the names, Banks, Campbell, among others, Trapillo, Ursery, Connerly. A lot of names have been thrown around here the last couple months, but how important is it that the Patriots get it right up front, especially with that fourth pick? Because as it stands now, they're either going to take an offensive lineman, or if Abdul Carter falls to them, or possibly Mason Graham. Whether it's the offensive or defensive line, how important is it for them to get it right?
It's so important. I mean, I think especially at evaluating Drake May, a lot of the problem last year was, how do you evaluate a guy who's constantly under pressure? And I think, you can talk about wide receiver play, but also you need protection up front. The processing speed at the NFL is just another level. And even if you have a guy that can make something out of nothing like Drake can, you still need to have time in that pocket to be able to deliver the ball. They need to find the right guy, A, to start building what you're talking about, but B, to evaluate who they have playing quarterback. So many times we see quarterbacks not get proper evaluation because the team – we just saw Saquon Barkley basically be hidden to New York because the offensive line there is not nearly good enough, and then go to Philadelphia where it's exceptionally good and have one of the best seasons all time for a running back. The offensive line is the most important part of a football team, in my opinion. And yes, so that's incredibly important for the Patriots to get it right, not only to build that, but also to evaluate who they have playing the most important position individually, which is the quarterback spot.
And Ken checks back in. Is Will Campbell the best option at 4 for the Patriots? Some compare him to last year, Joe Alt, that went to the Chargers. He's not Joe Alt. Joe Alt was a but he's a better prospect, plain and simple. I think Joe Alt's going to end up having a better career than Will Campbell. I think Will Campbell, look, we're going to hear this all week. We're going to hear it leading up to his pro day, the arm length talk and the 33 inches and all this other stuff. That is not as important as people think it is. There are plenty of guys in the league. Rashawn Slater comes to mind, for example, with the Los Angeles Chargers, who's an elite level left tackle with shorter arms. It's more about the vertical length, in my opinion, and what can a player at that position do from the waist down? Can he unlock his hips? Is he athletic? Does he have good feet? Those are the things that we're going to need to look at when we evaluate Will Campbell. Will Campbell is going to be in play at 4 for the Patriots, but the question becomes, how concerned is Doug Marrone, the Patriots offensive line coach, going to be with his arm length? Some guys, they put a lot of stock into that. Other guys don't. In my estimation, Andy, if he's sitting there at 4, and let's say Abdul Carter is gone and Travis Hunter is gone, those two blue chip type impact players, this is a guy that has to get strong consideration. Even though Mason Graham's name has come up a lot, I think Will Campbell has to get a lot of consideration at 4 because he can step in and play left tackle for you. And look, if the worst thing that happens is he has to kick inside and play guard, then so be it. He plays guard. Chances are, when you look at his body of work at LSU, he's going to play either one of these positions at a high level and be a potential Pro Bowl caliber type player.
I'd be surprised if they pushed him into guard. I mean, he's been starting 3 straight years in the SEC at tackle, and the SEC is probably the best comparison to the NFL. I mean, we don't need to get into the conference talk, but as far as individual players go, individual talent, 1-to-1 to the NFL, it's as good as you're going to get. So that's a good measuring stick to be like 3 consecutive seasons as a starter playing tackle for LSU. I think you can be pretty sure and sound about your analysis of his play at tackle. And I agree with you. Like, I think that would be an appropriate spot to take him, but you got to just see what happens ahead of you. I mean, Patriots might be in a spot where they could trade down if they wanted to compile assets. I mean, quarterbacks, we talked about how this is not necessarily the best quarterback class. It doesn't mean quarterbacks won't go high. They will. They always seem to do. So maybe you find yourself in a position at an attractive spot to trade back a few spots and still get a tackle that you like. Maybe it isn't Will Campbell. Maybe it's someone else. But I do think Will Campbell, everything I've heard him say, he does feel like a Mike Vrabel guy. Like, I don't know if you guys have watched any press conferences with Will Campbell.
It does remind
the
me
way
a lot
he
of Taylor
leads,
Lewan.
his mentality.
It reminds me a lot of Taylor Lewan.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. That kind of fiery, I'm going to beat your brakes in, but, he's also highly intelligent. He's got that good balance. Would not be surprised at all if that's the pick at 4.
Andy, John mentioned Ozzie a few minutes ago. We'll get into the other BC guys later, but him in particular, I know you covered. I'm trying to think. You covered the start of his career with me, correct? Yeah. So, just your thoughts on Ozzie and where you think he might fit in this draft.
First of all, really happy for him and Drew Kendall as well. I think it's such a cool story that both of them had fathers who played at BC and then played in the NFL. Now they're both going to the combine together, going through the draft process together after playing at BC together. And obviously both, Massachusetts guys. I think that's really cool. Ozzie has such a high ceiling. Before the season started, there was portal talk with him, talks of him potentially leaving Boston College. Here in Columbus at Ohio State, people were talking about, maybe he's a guy that Justin Fry would pluck from his old stomping grounds at Boston College. So there was talk of Ozzie Trapillo here. Anytime you have a tackle with a 6'7" or 6'8" frame, that's highly appealing to NFL people, because if you watch Ozzie Trapillo in pass protection, he's very good on his feet, very smooth, very quick. Pass protection's hard to teach at the next level. I think what NFL people will tell you is that it's easier to develop just a guy in the run game. Like, I think that Ozzie Trapillo probably has more, room to grow in that area than in pass protection, but I think that's okay. I mean, you're always going to be at a slight disadvantage when you're 6'7" or 6'8". Your pads are so high, leverage is hard to gain at that point. But I think his intangibles and the way he plays out on the edge to neutralize some of those speed rushers is going to be something that NFL scouts.
Yeah, I think overall his personality is great for an NFL locker room. He's a coach's dream, I think. He's one of those guys that it feels like he's going to do whatever he's told. He's going to do the right thing mostly at all times. And he's going to be there to learn and ultimately turn into a good pro. You hope. The only thing is, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, just to BC, yes, it's become O-line U or been known as O-line U, but I feel like just playing at BC lately might not garner the attention that others might get, which might make his job a little bit harder, try to stand out.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's a factor. I think Andy brought up a good point, though. When you look at the tackles in this class, whether it's Josh Connerly, Kelvin Banks, there's a lot of 6'4" guys. And again, the advantage that Ozzy Trapillo is going to have is he's 6'7" and change. Now, Andy also brings up another good point in terms of leverage and naturally bending. He's not a natural bender. You see it in the run game where he has a hard time sustaining blocks in the run game. He tends to fall off of blocks as a run blocker. He is a very good pass blocker, but even then, is he good enough that you draft him to play him on the left side? I still think he's a right tackle in the NFL. I do, because the thing is that 6'7" frame, that plays more at right tackle. I do think if you can teach him to lower his pad level, play with a lower pad level, drop his hips and his butt more, and fit into run blocks, I think you can get a pretty good run blocker, especially on reach blocks and zone cutoff blocks where he has to get his inside shoulder to the defender's outside shoulder. I think in those situations, if you can get him to play with better pad level and leverage, you can get a starting right tackle. I do think that depending on where he ends up and how he's coached, could he be a left tackle in a year or two? Maybe. But I still think long-term his future is at right tackle. Another thing to keep in mind is, and I don't see Ozzy kicking inside, but we're living in a time now where teams want bigger guards. Okay, that's why a kid like Ursery, the tackle for Minnesota, I could see him kicking inside and playing guard just like Daniel Falele did when the Baltimore Ravens drafted him. You're seeing more and more teams saying, hey, that's 6'6", 6'6.5", 330-pound right tackle. Why play him at right tackle? Let's play him inside, get him in the phone booth, get him on double teams, getting moving the pile, and help your inside run game and your inside pass pro. So Trapillo is going to be an interesting study. Him and Chase Lunt from UConn, similar type player. I think those guys are going to be interesting studies, and partly because, again, I don't think there's a lot of height with this tackle group. A lot of your, quote, elite level first-round guys are under what I consider the tackle threshold, which is 6'5".
Yeah, those are all really good points. I think another thing that'll be interesting to watch with Ozzy is that, look at what BC does. It's a lot of gap scheme football. I think that Ozzy could also fit in his own scheme. I mean, with that agility that he has, I'd be interested to see him out in space more, what he could do at the second level too. We see a little bit of that already at BC. But yeah, I think that teams will just mainly be attracted to his footwork, his size. And like you said, John, there is versatility there. He actually did start a few games at guard at Boston College. He had 10 starts at left tackle, 24 at right tackle. That's a lot of tape. And that's the thing these BC guys really always have for themselves, a lot of tape, a lot of consecutive starts. We'll talk about that with Drew Kendall too. But I think that's going to be a big thing that helps him in this process.
Ken checks back in. Would it make sense for the Patriots to draft down from number 4 and also make another trade in the draft in the early mid-20s and potentially select an offensive defensive player that would those two picks, I'm assuming is what Ken is saying here. Look, John and I talked about this yesterday. You could see a scenario playing out here where it's 2001 all over again when they took Richard Seymour at 6 out of Georgia and then they took Matt Light out of Purdue with their second-round pick. You could see that happen here. I think the Mason Graham talk is real with them at 4. I think they look at him. I think they see an impact player who could step in, start from day one, and make an impact. He's going to be more of a fit in this defense now than he would have been in the Belichick-Mayo scheme of the past 25 years. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here is there's a lot of uncertainty with Christian Barmore. So you could definitely see a scenario where they either stick and pick at 4 and surprise you and take a Mason Graham and then take that tackle either in the bottom of the first round via a trade or at 38. Or you could see them trading down from 4 to, let's say, 7. Let's say the Raiders want to come up to secure Shadur Sanders. They trade down to 6 or 7. They pick up maybe a second rounder this year. Now they have enough ammunition with 4 day 2 picks that they can move back into the first round and take an offensive tackle that they like. But Andy, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that real quick. I think the Mason Graham talk is real with the Patriots. I think he's got arguably the cleanest tape in this draft. We all know what kind of an impact player is, and you'll know what I'm talking about here. Just go back and watch that Ohio State game.
Yeah.
He wrecked shop in that game. Him at 4, to go back to a point you made earlier, might not necessarily be a sexy pick, but he's a dude. He's going to make an impact as a rookie.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this place hates Mason Graham, Columbus, Ohio. They absolutely.
I'm a Buckeyes fan. I share this.
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
like him as a Patriot if he ends up here, but.
Right. Well, a couple of years in a row, too. I mean, he made an impact in 2023 as well. Certainly did so in 2024. One of those holdovers. Will Johnson's another guy that comes up in that top 15 discussion of a really strong Michigan player that got a little bit overlooked this year because they just weren't.
I think the injuries hurt him. I mean, he's the other guy that I think is a blue chip caliber talent in that group.
Yes, I think so too. I mean, his production shows it. His cover skills do as well. But yeah, I think Mason Graham, really aggressive defensive tackle, can rush the passer really well. He just barrels over people almost to a fault sometimes. I think sometimes he can be too aggressive. But again, I think that's something like the way that they're built this staff so far, the way that the kind of culture you anticipate, what we saw with Tennessee when Vrabel was there, everything he stands for. Yeah, this is another guy like Will Campbell. Both of them fit that mold. They're just going to go after it. It's 100%, 110% all the time. Sometimes I think technique can kind of be sacrificed. Again, maybe that's a detriment and something they need to work on, but he just has all the energy and more, and very ferocious defensive tackle. Great tackler too. Like, can definitely chase down guys more than you think he could as like a backside defender.
Well, and I think the other thing with him is you can play him in a 3 tech and a 40 front. If you draft him on April 23rd, he's your starting 3 technique from day 1 in a 40 front. He can play the 0 nose in a 30 front. You can kick him out to a 5. You can reduce him down to a 3. I mean, you can do a lot with him. And you're talking about a guy who's, 6'3", probably 310 pounds. But he is a guy, as I said, he wrecked shop against Ohio State. And the thing with him that makes him intriguing but also tough to play against is he can either beat you one-on-one straight up, or you can get him going on those TE stunts and start moving him around, and he can make plays that way too. And again, I know Patriot fans are probably watching this saying, what the hell are you talking about? There's no way on earth they should take a defensive tackle at 4. But I'm telling you, he's one of the few guys, same thing with Will Campbell. I would say the same thing about Campbell. These guys have really clean tape. And again, this is a year where the strength of this draft is going to be inside. This is where Vrabel is going to want to focus to rebuild this team. I think, in my opinion, like I said, Mason Graham is a definite possibility there at 4, or even maybe a couple of picks later as part of a trade down. Although I'm beginning to think he might not get out of the top 5. You are watching/listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. And we are joined by old friend Andy Backstrom tonight. Just a reminder, if you're in the market to sell your current home, purchase your first home, or refinance, give our good buddy Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. Andy, I want to get your thoughts on this quarterback class. Obviously, the Patriots don't need a quarterback. They addressed that position last year, although I would not be opposed to them taking a quarterback maybe late day 3 or signing a priority free agent. But just some thoughts on this quarterback class. Obviously, it's nowhere near what we saw last year. And I know a lot of people made a big deal out of the Patriots beating the Bills the last weekend of the regular season and not securing that number 1 pick. But if there was ever a year to do that, this was the year, because I'm not sure that they would have gotten the return on that pick that people are talking about, because let's face it, quarterbacks drive the top of the draft. This isn't a great quarterback class. Your thought on this group?
It's always hard to really judge, John, because like we look at even 2018, now you look back and it's like, that was amazing, right? You look back at that class and you're talking about Baker Mayfield, you're talking about Sam Darnold, Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson, you go down the line, that's some great quarterback play. Lamar Jackson's won 2 MVPs. Josh Allen just won MVP. Baker Mayfield's resurrected his career. But at one point, look at that and you say Baker Mayfield, after his time in Cleveland went sour. I don't know about that. You look at Sam Darnold, he was penciled in as a bust until this last year. For a long time, the question with Josh Allen was, could he limit the turnovers? There's always questions after the first year, 2, 3 years out of a quarterback class. So while right now I agree with you that this is definitely not one that I look at and like, yeah, this is a slam dunk, you just don't know. We won't know for a few years. But I do think that when I look at it, the one that comes to mind most recently is Cam Ward. I feel like he's getting a lot of talk as maybe the first guy to go. You look at Tennessee, they feel like they need a quarterback probably. It just doesn't seem like Will Levis is it. I don't know if they go somewhere in free agency and try to just trade back and, compile some assets or what. Shador Sanders is someone else who is up there in that market for potential top quarterback. I know people have some questions about his arm strength as well. But yeah, I mean, as you go down the line, there's guys that I would have thought would have been higher. First of all, I thought Carson Beck would have been in this pecking order before last season of college football. He did not play very well. Quinn Ewers did not play very well last year after I thought a pretty strong 23 season. The ball just didn't look like it was coming out the same. He also had some more injury trouble, which of course is a big question mark for him. So I do think that there are some surprises. I think going into the college football season, I expected there to be a better quarterback class. But then you got guys like Ohio State people will know, Kyle McCord is there from Syracuse now transferring over, led the nation in passing. Will Howard at 7, who just, people have him ranked in that 7 to 10 range, I guess, right now. But he just won a national championship and came on quite strong towards the end of that year. So there's a lot of guys in that back half, I would say 6 to 10, where I think you can get kind of creative with maybe taking a guy in rounds 4 through 7 and be, hey, maybe he's our backup for a year or two. I mean, look at what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts. He was in that category as well back in 2020, and everyone was talking about Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa and near the top of the draft. And Jalen Hurts has won a Super Bowl before both of those guys. And he was a second-round pick, and at the time, people questioned why would the Eagles take him, right? They had Carson Wentz under contract. It didn't make any sense at the time. This does feel like I just keep referencing all the things the Eagles did, but their front office is killing it right now. So maybe we should all take notes. And so you're right, John. Maybe the Patriots go in and take a guy in the day 3 range, and maybe that's the guy that people are questioning. Why would you take someone like that? Because you have Drake, but maybe in a few years after that, that question gets answered.
Yeah. No, and I think another thing that's important is when I look at this class, I see more 2015, 2022. I don't see 21 was epically bad when they were supposed to be really good, but I see 2015, 2022 with this quarterback class. I don't see 2018 or 2020 or last year, not even close. Could be wrong, but when I look at Cam Ward, I see a souped-up Justin Fields. When I look at Shador Sanders, I see a souped-up Tyrod Taylor. I don't see an elite-level franchise guy there. Could be wrong. A year from now, I could be eating the crap sandwich, but I don't see that. I agree with you, though. I think rounds 2 through 6, you can get a developmental guy there, though. All right, Stone, go ahead because you're making that stupid sourpuss face. Get your question in.
No, I was actually about to sneeze, so I hope that didn't come off that way. Andy, sticking with the quarterback.
Feel free to sneeze, whatever.
No, sticking with the quarterbacks. Just looking at the Ohio State schedule, Andy. You guys didn't play Minnesota this year. I said you guys, but Ohio State didn't play Minnesota this year. But Max Brosler obviously has some local ties here. Went to UNH. Just curious if you have any thoughts or opinions on him. And I feel like he's going to be a guy that's flying under the radar there all week.
Yeah, he was fun to watch. I mean, I kept tabs on the Big Ten all season. Definitely watched what he did at Minnesota. He is a pretty polished quarterback for someone that went from FCS to FBS, and it was definitely intriguing to watch Minnesota because their record could have been much better than it was. There was a lot of one-score games that just didn't go their way. I thought he had a shaky start out there. First couple of games, I was unsure if he'd be able to make it through the full season, but I think around the start of October, he really started to find a groove. Prolific numbers at UNH. I'm sure he will be a guy that will be in that day 3 range or maybe an undrafted free agent. He's definitely going to get a camp invite. He'll be somewhere. I think, I've heard before this, a lot of quarterbacks get a chance. Like it's very rare. I mean, we see like Ian Book started a game or two
Yeah.
in the
I mean,
NFL. Like random
not,
players
not
will
to
get
interrupt.
opportunities.
No, not to interrupt. Just look at EJ Perry. A
Yeah.
kid like him.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, most of the time you're going to get a opportunity. I feel like that'll be the way for Max Brosberg. Awesome career though. I always love when guys take that jump from FCS to FBS for their graduate year or whatnot. It was fun to watch him.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think he definitely profiles as someone who could be a potential backup. And again, I think when you look at this quarterback class, you mentioned Kyle McCord, Will Howard. Those are guys, in my opinion, that if they end up in the right situation, could potentially develop into starters for you down the road. It's not hyperbole. And I think it's important to realize, you mentioned Jalen Hurts. You don't necessarily have to take a quarterback in the first round. We know that all too well around here. So, again, don't discount taking a guy later that you can develop. Yes, the odds are that if you take a quarterback in the first round, your odds of developing that quarterback into a legitimate starter are higher, just as any other position. But I do think this is a sneaky quarterback class where if you get past the top 2, 3, 4 guys, I mean, some people think Jackson Dart's going to go in the first round. Some people think Jalen Milroe. You mentioned Carson Beck. We all thought he was going to be in this draft. So, I think that those guys will end up falling back into that second round to round 6 window, and that's where I think you could get a guy that you can develop, and you never know, you can get a starter out of it. Ken checks back in. I think he's co-hosting with us at this point. Would it come as a surprise if the Patriots take a wide receiver at 4? In my opinion, yes. I know early on people thought, oh, maybe Ted McMillan is a possibility. I don't see that happening. If they deviate from an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, I think it would be for Travis Hunter. Outside of Hunter, I don't see them taking a skill guy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually don't think that would be a good pick at 4 to go with McMillan. I mean, I think he's a good player. It's super fun to watch at Arizona, but I have questions if he can win on the outside, like consistently at the NFL level. I think 4 is too high to pick someone like him. He might be great, but I wouldn't go at 4 for him. I do see the Travis Hunter argument. I mean, he's just as good as it gets at 2 high value positions. I mean, you could conceivably use him as a receiver in some packages. He's not going to play 100+ snaps per game in the NFL playing both ways, but there is a world in which he plays some offensive packages as a wide receiver. And for a wide receiver needy team like the Patriots, that's a good thing. And then have him line up and hopefully he's a shutdown corner. I think there's great value there as well. I think you definitely need to consider him if he's there. It's hard to stay away from him because he just feels like a guy that's a lock to be a star. I mean, it's hard to pick away from a guy like that, even as we talk about someone like Will Campbell or Mason Graham, who also seem like they're destined to be good players. It just feels like Travis Hunter, if he's there, I'd have a hard time not picking him. Those are the 3 guys. I think you're right on with the other 2, John, but Travis Hunter, I'd have a hard time passing up on.
Yeah, it's just you have too many holes on both sides of the line. Andy, you referenced it earlier to watch that Super Bowl. Games are won up front. Like you need to focus defensive line or offensive line at 4, I think. Unless it's Hunter, then yeah, you're having a discussion there.
Yeah, you're at least talking about it. That's for sure. He's at that level. I mean, you win the Heisman Trophy, not playing quarterback, you're going to talk about it, right? So I think that's the discussion. But yeah, I think McMillan at 4. I've seen that mocked. I'm with you guys. I don't think that would be wise for the Patriots.
So let's kind of piggyback off of that at wide receiver. They are going to take at least one wide receiver in this draft at some point. Again, when you look at wide receiver in this draft, you're still going to have your customary 3 or 4 guys go in the first round. I've said it now for years that position will always be a position that you can restock at, assuming you pick the right guy, of course. You can restock at that position because in this era of spread football, those guys are now they're everywhere. Receivers are everywhere. They come in all different shapes and sizes. Obviously, we know Bill Belichick's track record with developing receivers, not very good. The book is still out on Jalen Polk and Baker from last year to be determined on those guys. It's not looking good so far. But Do you see the Patriots going receiver earlier or later? And if so, are there a couple of names there that you think might be good fits for them?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of receivers I like in this class, so I don't think you need to be using that first pick. I like a lot someone like Matthew Golden, who's not necessarily the most talented physically in this class, but he's just a football player. Like, he makes things happen on the field. It was kind of a shame to see him go down in the CFP because I felt like that hurt Texas's chances, and people here in Columbus loved that because it gave Ohio State an edge. But I think Matthew Golden's someone that could be a good player at the next level given the right circumstances. Isaiah Bond, his teammate, I don't think had a particularly good year, but you look at what he did earlier in his career, and I thought he could be promising as a prospect as well. So those are guys. Kyle Williams from Washington State is another name that I would throw out there as well. I think you look at Luther Burden from Missouri, he's a big slot guy. A lot of in the quick game. I like him. I like Emeka Egbuka more than Luther Burden because he's more versatile. You can put him in the slot. I think he's more of a as a slot guy that can win contested catches as well. Receiver class. My point is you don't need to go with your first pick at receiver. Again, to your point earlier, John, like that, it might not be the sexy pick, but you might have to go somewhere in the trenches or Hunter, as we mentioned, and then down the line, you're picking a receiver. Okay, I mean, I don't think you need to be upset about that. I think that with time and development, you can make that work as long as you have serviceable options at the position.
Yeah, you did break down. You broke up there a little bit, Andy, when you were listing some of the other names. I agree with you about Emeka Egbuka. Going into the season, he was probably profiling more as a third-round pick. Then all of a sudden, you're watching him play, and you're like, maybe he's a second-round pick. Now, I'd be shocked if he got out of the first round. If nothing else, he's at the doorstep of the first round. But he's a guy, when we talk about the Patriots possibly trading back into the first round, there's a name that people should keep an eye on because he's a guy that fits what they need right now. And they need a guy that resembles a number one receiver. He can develop into that guy. He can play in the slot. He can play on the line of scrimmage. He can play the X, the F, the Z. You can really move him around, and he gives you a lot of schematical versatility.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I don't know if I can Amon-Ra St. Brown's the guy that I think of when I watch Emeka Egbuka, and that's a wide receiver one that's not necessarily the kind of wide receiver one you think of. He's not Tet McMillan, like he's not 6'5", the big guy that's going to jump up and get the 50-50 ball, but he can win contested catches. One thing I love about Emeka Egbuka, he's really good with late hands. Like he'll throw up his hands at the last second to make a catch in the end zone, not allowing that defensive back to get their hands up in coverage. I think he's a technically sound guy. He's not necessarily the fastest, but he's tough and physical and get yards after the catch by breaking a tackle or two.
Andy, I did want to get to the other BC guys. Obviously, Donovan is sort of the main event from our perspective, but just some thoughts on Cam Horsley, who I think can make some noise this week, and the other guys as well.
Yeah, I think Cam Horsley, the best thing he's got going, well, first of all, he's played a lot of football. He was through all the Hafley era and then last year with Bill O'Brien as well. So he's got that going for him. He also has great size at 6'4", 310, 320 pounds. I mean, spot to be at. I think he can play if he needed to. He also knows. Again, just a lot of tape there. And he's he's pretty good at stopping the run. I think you would like more as a pass rusher from him. I don't know if he'd be able to play 3-tech because I don't know if I'd seen pressure generating. But I like the way he's played in that defensive line. And also I think he helped Donovan Ezraku have the success he had. Anytime you have an edge with 16.5 sacks, you also have to compliment some of those other guys in the middle that are, taking up some blocks and making things easier for the guys on the edge. So, but yeah, as you mentioned, Donovan Ezraku, great football player. As I've watched BC now for about the last decade, and he's up there with Harold Landry as one of the most just havoc-wreaking, dominating defensive linemen that you just are so sure are going to be good in the NFL. Harold Landry had kind of a tough last year at BC because of injury, but I had no doubts he was going to be good in the NFL. He fell to the second round of the Titans and has been pretty good with them in the league. And I think that whether he goes in the second or the first, that is Donovan, I think he's going to have a great long ender because he's so versatile. He wins so many moves. Like he has a club. I think whatever he wants, pass rush artist. I do think he could be undefending, but that's something you see.
Yeah, he's a little light in the pants. That's going to be the key with him. I do think I could see a scenario where he sneaks into the first round, probably the 18 to 32 range. But that's going to be the big thing. Yeah, I think he tests well this week. I think assuming he works out at his pro day next month, I think he'll test well there too, depending on whether or not he decides to work out this weekend or at that pro day. I'm not worried about that, but when you put on the tape, you're seeing a guy who's a dominant player on second and long and third and long, but you get him into first and 10, second and short, third and short. He's about 247 pounds. He needs to be able to play at around 255, which it might be hard to do to add another 7 or 8 pounds to that frame. He's only about 6'2" and change. So he does need to be a better run defender though, because if you take him in the first round, he's got to be a 3-down guy. He can't be a guy that strictly plays on passing downs. He's got to be a guy that can do more there for you than that. Good friend of the show, Bill Vaughn, checks in. Thanks for checking in, Bill. Who are you guys guessing as of today as the first, second, third overall picks ahead of the Pats? If I had to guess as of today, I would say Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, Patriots then pick at 4.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a chance Carter goes 1. You could maybe have Ward at 2, Hunter at 3. I mean, it's going to depend on the order, but I think that top 3 is probably where I go at right now, unless you see someone reach for Sanders. I think that's the only thing. If the Giants try to reach up for quarterback and take Sanders, maybe that differs.
Any chance the Pats move up to 1 to get Carter?
No.
I don't throw it out there.
I don't think so. I think it's a fair question that, quite frankly, hasn't been brought up enough.
No, I can see them talking about it. I don't see it happening, but I am surprised that it hasn't been discussed a little bit more. Who knows? Maybe it heats up as we get closer to draft time, but it does feel like a discussion that it's at least worth having.
Well, Carter still has the same issue that we just talked about with Donovan Mazaraku. Like he also is a bit light in the pants. Like he's not a great off-ball defender. He's not great against the run. He switched from linebacker to edge. I love him as a pass rusher. I don't know about him in other areas. So the fact that he's even considered so high, I think he's a top 10 guy for sure. I think he might be a little bit higher rated right now than I would put him, but I wouldn't trade up for him.
No, and that's what's weird about this draft, though, at the top. Here we are, glazing this draft class when it comes to offensive linemen and defensive linemen and edge guys. But the reality is, even a guy like Abdul Carter, he's not a dominant football player. Many people love to compare him to Micah Parsons because, similar position, similar number. He's not Micah Parsons. You talk about the off-the-ball element. Micah Parsons, you've seen how the Cowboys have used him in his first 4 years in the league. He'll play on the ball. He'll play the mug technique. He'll play off the ball. He'll detach. They do a lot of different things with him in Dallas. I don't think you can do those things with Abdul Carter. And again, I think if you had asked when the calendar turned to the new year, who was the consensus number 1 pick, I think a lot of people would have told you Travis Hunter, but it's amazing to me how much he's losing steam now. A couple of people have told me that the league is starting to be split on him as well. So it's a really weird draft class. And I will say this, when in doubt, quarterback goes 1. If the Tennessee Titans can't trade down, they find no takers for that pick, and I do think they're going to shop it. If they find no takers, they may also just say, you know what, F it. We're going to take Cam Ward, take our chances, and hope that Brian Callahan can develop him. And you know what? Cam Ward, to me, has the most upside of any quarterback in this class, really by a mile. I could see him becoming a top 10, top 15 quarterback down the road if he's handled right. Maybe Tennessee says, why wait? Let's just take him and make him our guy.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think that quarterback is usually the top spot. And unless
It's an
it's a
easier
weird
sell to
draft
the
class like
fan
this
base
one.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and GMs that feel like they need to make a move. I mean, you're looking at Tennessee, you're looking at New York, Cleveland's in the like. There's teams that just they feel like they need something. There's pressure. Either they picked the wrong guy, they invested the wrong guy in Cleveland. There's organizations that are facing pressure. Sometimes they reach. I mean, look, Daniel Jones went number 6, right? Like that. You see this all the time. So I'm with you there. I think that there's a high chance that it's quarterback 1, quarterback 3. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 2 quarterbacks go off the board in the top 4, and that's a good thing for New England. That's a really good thing. You're in a great
Because
position.
Vegas might come a calling and say, "Hey, we want to secure Shadur Sanders. Will you trade down with us?" Now you're looking at trading down a couple spots, but again, that might net you a second-round pick. That might even net you a future first. I think that would be a stretch, but that might net you a couple more picks. And again, if the Patriots can somehow add a second rounder, now you have 2 2s, 2 3s. Man, you have a lot of ammunition there now where you can move back into the first round, which quite frankly, I would hope that they would do. Because again, if you could come out of this draft with 2 first-round picks and solidify 2 areas that you need to solidify, I think that would be huge. We got a few minutes left here, Andy, but I do want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball. You mentioned earlier how they have multiple needs, right? And Kevin and I have talked about this ad nauseum in recent weeks, that really outside of May, I mean, you can draft a player at every other position and you hope that they come in and help you. One of the areas that I think they need to fortify in free agency and this draft is corner. I think they're a corner short. I've said that now for 2 years. Christian Gonzalez had a great bounce back year, proved that he's an all-pro caliber player at the quarterback position, but you need a corner opposite him. In your time covering Ohio State and watching college football, is there a corner at the combine or in this draft that you think could be a good fit opposite Gonzalez?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about trading back in the first round, this might be a guy that goes in the second even. I think Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, people don't talk about him because he was hurt this year, but great lengthy corner who really can make a difference. So I would look at him. I would also look at someone like Jahdae Barron. I don't know how high but he's really someone that you could even play like a nickel spot inside. He's a great tackler, high tackle rate. So I
he
like him as
strikes me
well.
more as a press cover two. Yeah, he strikes me more as a press cover two, funnel flat type corner. To your point, that can support the run, and he's big and physical. I'll throw a name out as a possible, and I can't believe I'm saying this as a possible day 3 guy because 2 years ago he probably, if he had come out, he would have been a first round pick, and even last year. But Denzel Burke out of Ohio State, I like him a lot. I think that's a value pick there, late day 2, early day 3. I could see him going in that 4th or 5th round range, if not sooner.
Yeah, he plays like he's going to be a first round pick. I'll tell you that. He's a confident guy. So, I think his stock has fallen a bit, especially with the way he had a tough game against Oregon in the regular season, got kind of butchered on that one. It's tough to recover in scouts' eyes, I think, from a performance like that. But he played well down the stretch. He can be physical at times. I've seen him blow up screens. Certainly is a capable tackler. And I think that at times he can get beat downfield, but ultimately a good prospect. Like you said, I mean, he could have good value on day 3 if that's where he falls.
Andy, just sticking with the Ohio State guys, anybody in particular Patriots fan should either know or be researching or eventually hoping that they're buying his jersey?
Well, we talk about offensive tackles, and again, like I guess in the scenario of maybe you trade back or maybe you just like a guy more than other. And we talked a lot about Will Campbell, maybe that's their guy, but Josh Simmons is getting a lot of attention too, and he's a really, really athletic tackle that has a high upside. I think we've yet to even see the best of Josh Simmons. He played at San Diego State and then transferred in, had a okay to good 2023 and was having an exceptional 2024 before he had a knee injury. And I think that, yeah, you're always cautious about, okay, where is a guy at after an injury like that? But I think a lot of scouts right now are very high on Josh Simmons. So if you look at the tackle position, he's another option there. We talked about Emeka Egbuka at wide receiver. I think he's certainly capable. Running back, we talk about that's a stack class. And if you're trying to add value there, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are both star capable players. Both were awesome in the college football playoff, but really awesome all year. I think they're both home run hitters. They're both physical. Really, Ohio State was able to use them interchangeably throughout the season. So if you're looking at running back to add a guy in the second round, that's probably someone you could get there. So I would say those come to mind first. But, you know, and we talk about edge too. I mean, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, I think I mentioned them earlier on in the show, but they might drop to the second round. And I think they both have round one upside. At their best, they can take over a game. Jack Sawyer played really well down the stretch. JT Tuimoloau, never quite replicated the game he had against Penn State in 2022. I don't think anyone will, but he has had good games throughout his career. And they're both pretty well-rounded defensive ends. I actually like both of them against the run. Maybe they're not as good of a pass rusher as the other guys we've mentioned so far, but I think they're both pretty complete players.
Yeah, and of course, Mike Vrabel is an Ohio State guy. He played at Ohio State, coached at Ohio State. Something tells me I think some of those names you just mentioned are going to be in play for the Patriots. And certainly the other thing you got to like about those Ohio State guys, Andy, is they stuck around. A lot of people, when Ohio State won the national title, a lot of people talked about the money they spent to bring in Will Howard and Junkins and Caleb Downs, and that's fair. I mean, they spent $20 million in the portal to bring those guys in. But when you look at these guys on defense, these are all homegrown guys. These are all Ohio State guys that they recruited as high schoolers that came into the program that opted to stay and compete for national title. JTT, Sawyer, Denzel Burke, Simon. Yeah, Simon. Yeah, I mean, Lathan Ransom. I mean, these guys all came back to win a national championship, and they did. And yes, I'm partial being an Ohio State fan. It was freaking awesome. But I think that that's an important point here. If I'm evaluating these guys and I'm a scout, I'm a front office executive, I take that into account, that these guys could have come out and made money last year. And granted, they made money with NIL, but they chose to stay. They chose to stay, and they were rewarded for it. And I think that kind of loyalty will matter around the league with scouts and executives.
Mm-hmm. Now, those are going to be questions they'll be fielding this week as well. And that's going to rear well for them. I think that it all panned out. I mean, they wanted to beat Michigan. They wanted to win the Big Ten, but they won the national championship. So that validated that choice big time. And yeah, I think you're right to say that Vrabel has been around this part. He knows that program through and through. He played there, coached there. There's a lot there. So wouldn't be surprised if, I think Cody Simon is another guy you mentioned. I don't know. The linebacker's not necessarily in the top three positions of need, maybe for the Patriots.
But it is. If you think about it, Taki the other day, Jawan Bentley's coming off an injury. Jelani Tavai struggled at times last year. I think it is a position that, especially in this new scheme, I do think they're going to want to play with two linebackers a lot. I think it's a position that they can certainly address on day 3. Ken checks back in again. Seeing how the combine goes, what do you want to see will be the biggest takeaway if you're a Pats fan, and whom potentially could be drafted by New England? I don't really know what Ken was asking us there. I think he wants to know how we see the combine shaking out for the Patriots. I'm assuming. Thanks for checking in, Ken. So ultimately, I mean, if you're a Patriots fan, let me rephrase Ken's question. If you're a Patriots fan, how much stock should you be putting into the combine? And is it an event now that we can watch this weekend and say, yeah, that's a guy I could see them taking?
I think the combine is, as you kind of touched on earlier, like it's changing as the years go on. I actually think it's now more for the media and all these smoke screens to get out and rumors to come out than it is for the players. A lot of these guys aren't even participating in a lot of the drills. You don't see as many quarterbacks throwing anymore. I think Shedeur Sanders already opted out of throwing. So I don't know how much it is to read into the actual performances that you'll see on NFL Network and watch the 40s. And that's fun. And we all do that. And that's a great thing. But I would more focus on what the reports are coming out of Indianapolis. There's a lot of insiders that are there. There's a lot of late nights. in Indianapolis, people trading secrets, reports actually being broken. Some of it are smoke screens, and you need to be aware of that through this draft season. But others are real, and I think this is the time this next week you'll start to hear about potential trade ups. Maybe the top quarterback will emerge, and you'll start to hear the Titans are going with this guy. I think after this week, things will be a little bit clearer about 1 through 4. And as a Patriots fan, I think you'll get a little bit better of an idea of what they might do after this week in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I think if you're a fan, this weekend maybe more so, or definitely more so than last year, you can just sort of sit back and enjoy it. For me, I think if you're the organization, those interviews are what's most important this week. Getting to know those guys behind the scenes and off the field. That's what I think the staff can learn the most. But if you're a fan, I'm not sure. And Andy, you said that we're all going to watch, and the 40s are fun, and the passing drills, and seeing the receivers run the gauntlet, and all that. It's fun, but I'm not sure you can necessarily take a ton away if you're a fan and say, that's the guy that should take or whatever, because they have so many holes.
Yeah, but again, I do think where the combine has value is, I know that a lot of people poo-poo the fact that these guys are out there running around, in spandex tops and compression shorts, but the reality is, you want to see the game tape's the game tape. That's part of the evaluation. But now you got the combine, you got the pro days. And Andy did bring up a good point. Guys aren't working out as much anymore in Indianapolis. But I do think that the on-field drills portion of this event is important. It's especially important for the non-first-round guys. Those guys want to work out. They want to show up. They want to show out. And I would work out again at your pro day, because you may not run a great 40 in Indy this weekend, but then you can make up for that at your pro day next month. So it's a part of the process, as Daniel Jeremiah calls it, the triple crown of draft season. So it'll be interesting indeed. Andy, of course, you're going to be there all week. You'll be providing content for us. Please make sure you follow Andy on X. We'll be retweeting his stuff. We'll also be posting any of the content he produces. So we're looking forward to that. Andy, I want to say thank you for taking the time, man. Greatly appreciate it. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time, my friend. Like I said, it's great to see you, and we look forward to your work this week from the Combine in Indianapolis. That'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. For Kevin Stone and Andy Backstrom, I'm John Serenitas. We will be back with you next week. Until then, peace.
See ya.